So the final 3 Blu-ray releases from Warner Archive of January 2023 just came out, and I'm here to talk about them. That is The Long, Long Trailer, Wife vs. Secretary, and Goodbye, Mr. Chips. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Cobwebs channel, where we are dusting off classic movies. My name is Daniel, and yes, I am here to talk about those 3 movies that just came on Blu-ray from Warner Archive just this past week. And I'm going to tell you about what these movies are about, what their qualities are, if it's the kind of thing that you think you might be interested in adding to your collection. Spoiler free, of course. And let's just jump right in with the movie that I've been hearing the most buzz about online, that seems to be getting the most excitement from Warner Archive collectors and classic film fans. And that is The Long, Long Trailer from 1954. This movie is 96 minutes long. So as you can tell just from looking at the cover, this movie is starring Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz. These are the stars of the I Love Lucy sitcom that was huge in the 1950s. And this was made during the height of the craze of that show, the popularity of that show. So it was them teaming up. Of course, they were married in real life, but teaming up to go on the silver screen, because most people in this time were used to watching them on a tiny little black and white television in their homes. But with this movie, you can go to the theater, you can watch them in color on a giant screen, because yes, this is a big, beautiful color film directed by Vincent Minnelli. And it's a comedy, and of course, and what the movie essentially is a road trip movie. Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz's characters, not the I Love Lucy characters. These are different characters. And they just got married, and Lucille Ball's character, she hatches a scheme. Desi Arnaz, because his job takes him on the road a lot, and they don't have a lot of money for a house, she thinks, well, why don't we just get a trailer, a mobile home, essentially, that we lug on the back of our car, and just travel from place to place, go from trailer park to trailer park, and just kind of see the country and travel around and have a good time. And that's essentially what she wants to do. And of course, much like the TV show, Desi Arnaz is a little bit nervous about this. He's kind of scared. He doesn't know about this whole living in a trailer kind of thing. But of course, he goes along with it. And yeah, the movie is a road trip film, and it's really a movie of set pieces. This is a movie where you've got, the story is very simple, right? It's just people going out on a road trip on their honeymoon. The movie's about their honeymoon. It just goes from set piece to set piece of like, well, what happens if the trailer goes into a ditch and then the trailer is totally crooked? Or what happens if we're trying to back into a long driveway and we can't quite do it? What happens if Lucille Ball is trying to cook in the back of the trailer while Desi Arnaz is driving it, and all the craziness that ensues with that? It's just a zany, wild comedy, and I had a lot of fun watching it. There's not a ton to say about this movie because there's not a lot of character or plot stuff going on. It's very much these comedy stars that you know and love off on a road trip having fun. You get to see a lot of America in the 1950s. There's a lot of beautiful locations, both in town and natural locations that are just lovely. There's this one scene that really stands out to me where they are trying to go up a mountain, essentially, and it's this long, windy road going up, up, up. And the movie actually gets a lot of intensity out of this sequence. And it's extra funny because they're both trying to have a conversation about something completely unrelated and unimportant, while they're both very nervous about this, but they don't want to tell each other they're nervous about it. They're not talking about what they're really thinking about. So it's a very funny scene, but also very intense, because the movie really sells just how dangerous this is. I might actually compare this to the Tom Hanks comedy from the 80s, The Money Pit, because it's essentially about this trailer just keeps sucking more and more money out of them as they keep having more and more problems with it. And the kind of comedy style that's in The Money Pit, I think, is fairly similar to this if you've seen that movie. So I'm very happy that Warner Archive put this on Blu-ray, put this movie back in the conversation, because honestly, I had never heard of it. I am not a big I Love Lucy fan. Nothing against that show. I just didn't grow up with it. I haven't watched it very much. I did grow up on a lot of TV shows from that time. So I came into it as a bit outside of the main appeal of the movie, but I still had a lot of fun with it. It is a big, beautiful, funny movie. I think it's a good time. So the last 2 Warner Archive releases that they released didn't have any special features. Not so with these. You get a little something. So this has a vintage Pete Smith specialty short called Ain't Aggravatin', and it's got a classic cartoon, Dixieland Droopy, as well as the theatrical trailer. And I'll just show you the disc right in there. It is another solid release from Warner Archive. Looks fantastic on this Blu-ray. I recommend it. Next up, let's talk about my personal favorite from this stack, and that is Wife vs. Secretary. It's from 1936, and it's 87 minutes long. And as you can see from the cover, it's got an all-star cast of Clark Gable, Myrna Loy, and Jean Harlow. So what is this movie? Well, it is about Clark Gable and Myrna Loy, and they are married. And if classic cinema has taught us anything, it's that if you are married to Myrna Loy, you're going to have a fantastic marriage, and you're going to love each other so much. Because, of course, Myrna Loy teamed up with William Powell in all the Thin Man movies. Thank you, Warner Archive, for releasing the Thin Man movies on Blu-ray, by the way. But here she's with Clark Gable. He is a millionaire business executive who's very successful, and they just have a great marriage. They have so much fun. The movie just really sells just how incredibly happy they are, and they're very cute. But Jean Harlow plays his secretary, and she is, of course, Jean Harlow, so she's very beautiful. Jean Harlow was a very big star back in this time. I probably first knew her from Public Enemy with James Cagney. But so she is a gorgeous secretary, but he doesn't really seem to care about that. He works in advertising, so he works around models a lot, and that's not a big deal to him. And him and Myrna Loy have a trusting relationship, so she trusts him. But people around Myrna Loy just keep kind of putting the ideas in her head that, like, hey, you shouldn't allow your husband to have such a beautiful secretary because he's going to cheat on you. And he doesn't really give indications that he's going to cheat on her or anything like that. She just gets it in her head, and he's just such a happy-go-lucky guy that sometimes I think it looks like he's flirting with his secretary when he's really not. He's just, the movie makes it clear that they are good friends. But Jean Harlow might have kind of a crush on Clark Gable, but she's not a bad person. She's not a femme fatale. She's not trying to steal him. In fact, she has her own boyfriend, who is Jimmy Stewart in this movie. Jimmy Stewart has got a supporting role in this film. He's not in it a lot, but it is great to see him. And this movie is a bit odd because it's kind of a genre-less movie because it looks a lot like a comedy. It looks like a screwball comedy from the cover. That's what I guessed. That's probably what you guessed too. And it's not really that because it doesn't really have jokes. Like, it's not so much that it's not funny when it's trying to be funny. It's not really trying to be funny very much. There's maybe some smirk moments of like, oh, they're cute. They, Clark Gable, he's a fun guy. But there aren't a lot of jokes in this movie, not a lot of zany antics, not really comedic. But it's not quite serious enough to be a full-on drama, so it's kind of right in the middle. It's just kind of a lighter drama, you might say. And that kind of sounds bad about the movie, but I actually thought it worked because it was an interesting story. I thought the movie actually drew a lot of tension out of, like, are they going to have marital problems because of this suspicion? Is he actually going to cheat on her with Jean Harlow? Because for a lot of the movie, you don't really know. And the movie gets some tension out of that, both sexual tension and just tension, really. And I thought it was an interesting movie, very much with a message about how you should trust your spouse and you shouldn't let suspicion and jealousy erode that good relationship that you have. And the movie's not super subtle about that message, but doesn't really beat you over the head with it either. The actors are just so good. It doesn't fall back on wacky misunderstandings or zaniness. It always feels very grounded in reality and true to these characters. And I thought it was a very good movie, and it is my favorite of these three. I am big into 1930s movies. It's a beautiful black and white film. The Warner Archive Blu-ray does look great. As far as special features, it has an Oscar-winning short called The Public Pays, as well as the theatrical trailer. I'll show you the inside there. Are you guys fans of Clark Gable? I kind of wonder, other than like maybe Gone with the Wind, has Clark Gable like retained the star power today that like Cary Grant and Jimmy Stewart have? I'm not sure if people still talk about Clark Gable a lot. Maybe it happened one night. People talk about that. But I really like Clark Gable. So if you're a fan, let me know down below. I also thought Myrna Loy was great in this movie, as she always is. But Jean Harlow, really, really good. Great Jean Harlow in this movie. I thought she was fantastic. So I am definitely a fan of that. And lastly, let's go to Goodbye, Mr. Chips. This is starring Robert Donat. It's from 1939 and it's 114 minutes, the longest movie Warner Archive is releasing this month. And I wasn't familiar with this movie going in. Apparently it does have a remake from the 1960s starring Peter O'Toole that I've heard is not very good, but this is the original 1930s version. And apparently it's somewhat of a classic. So I'm glad Warner Archive put it on my radar and allowed me a reason to seek this film out. Now, ultimately, this movie kind of fits into that classic genre of inspiring teacher movies. Whether you look at Robin Williams in Dead Poet Society, or Richard Dreyfuss in Mr. Holland's Opus, or one that I just saw for the first time and kind of shot right up to the top of that list for me, Sidney Poitier in To Sir with Love, great film. Goodbye, Mr. Chips kind of fits in there because it is about a teacher and it is about his entire life. And Robert Donat plays him the whole way at every different age. It starts out with him young, as you can see him here on the cover, starting out as a teacher at a boys' boarding school. And the movie goes through several different phases of his life and just shows his life as a teacher at this boarding school and as someone who stayed with this one job, with this one school, his entire career. Interesting thing is, as you can see him on the cover, he only appears like that in the movie for like 1 or 2 scenes. Most of the movie, he is middle-aged and then, or at the very end of his life, very old. That's the majority of this movie. And Robert Donat is not one of my favorite classic film actors, to be honest, but I thought he was very good in this movie. One of the biggest reasons to seek this film out, because this isn't a typical like old Hollywood performance where, like, say, Wife versus Secretary, these people are all being very charming movie stars. Robert Donat isn't going for charming movie star. It's a really actory performance, and he's very much created a character, and he's totally different than I've seen him in any other movie. It's a very, very different kind of performance, and for a 1930s movie, I thought that was very cool to see. But for me, the absolute highlight of this movie was Greer Garson, the young lady that you can see him with on the cover. She also played Elizabeth Bennet in the 1940s Pride and Prejudice, which is also on Warner Archive Blu-ray. And this is just like one of the most charming performances I've seen in a movie in a long time. She is his love interest in the movie, and she is so good. And I thought the section of the movie that's about their romance, which is only a section of the film, was by far the most effective part of the movie. But that is a part of the movie that's not involved with the school or teaching, hardly at all. And that does kind of point to the fact that the most effective stuff in the film is not involved with the main point, which is teachers and schools. This movie, like I said, fits into that inspiring teacher genre, but it's not really about that. It's not really about what a great teacher he is, how much he connects with the kids. There's not really much of any emphasis on his relationship with any of the students. So there's no like one student that he really makes a big impact on, like in Dead Poet Society or something like that. Not so much. This is about his commitment to an institution. And I did think that was admirable, especially in this day and age when people of my generation, like the way the economy works right now, we just kind of move jobs a lot, seems like. I personally haven't in a while, but a lot of people my age do. And this movie is about a guy who committed to one school, one institution, and he really became an institution at that school, like a person that was very important there because he had always been there. And there's a big emphasis on generations and how he'll come across students and be like, oh, I remember your father looked just like you, because he has been around that school for so long, and so many different generations of boys have come through this school. And I thought that that was cool. The movie for me was not great. It is good. It is serviceable. It never really gets any big emotions out. I don't know that it's really going for big emotions a lot. Like I said, I thought the romance was the most effective stuff, but that's kind of separate from the main point of the movie, which wasn't as effective as a lot of other teacher films that I've seen. I don't see myself rewatching this very much in the future, but I'm glad to have seen it. I certainly did not waste my time, and Robert Donat gave a very good and interesting performance for a 1930s movie. A unique performance, definitely. So that's it, folks. The final 3 movies released by Warner Archive for January 2023. That is Goodbye, Mr. Chips, Wife versus Secretary, and The Long, Long Trailer. Warner Archive did release 2 more movies this month, Rancho Notorious and Our Dancing Daughters. I did cover those on the channel already, so if you missed that, check the description down below, or just click on my channel. It was only a couple of videos ago. So that concludes our coverage of January Warner Archive releases. Looks like they're not going to be putting out anything in February, but they have announced 6 movies for March, which is very exciting. I'm excited about a lot of those. I plan to cover at least most of them. We'll see how many I end up doing. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. I really appreciate it. As always, give a like to this video if you enjoyed it, a comment down below to let me know what you think. And if you want more coverage of old movies, of classic film, which I am such a big fan of, if you are also a big fan, give us a subscribe because there are more videos like this on the way. Thanks a lot. I'll see you next time.